In the vast, remote deserts of China, archaeologists unearthed a discovery that left the world questioning everything they thought they knew about ancient civilizations. The mummies found here weren't like anything expected. They had European features, blonde hair, light eyes, and a striking resemblance to people from far-off lands. These bodies are over 4,000 years old, but their DNA is European. How did these people end up in ancient China? And why has this discovery been kept under wraps for so long? Let's step back in time to the late 20th century, to the hot and arid Tarim Basin, located in the far western corner of China in the Xinjiang province. A place so remote, it seems almost impossible that any foreign culture could have influenced it. But that's exactly what archaeologists discovered. In 1978, researchers stumbled upon a grave site that would soon challenge everything historians knew about early China. These were not the remains of typical Han Chinese people. Instead, they found mummies with sharp European features, their bodies preserved so perfectly that their blonde hair and detailed clothing were still visible after thousands of years. What's even more astonishing is that these mummies were so well preserved that experts could analyze their clothing, hair, and even their tattoos. The preservation wasn't just superficial, it extended to their entire cultural identity. Their clothes, woven fabrics with intricate patterns, were unlike anything seen in China. Some of the mummies even had tattoos, suggesting a completely different cultural practice from the ancient Chinese. But here's the real bombshell. Carbon dating revealed that these bodies lived approximately 4,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the Silk Road was even established. That's long before the famous trade route between China and the West began. So how did these Caucasian people end up in the middle of the ancient Chinese desert? And why are there no historical records of them? Despite being thousands of miles away from Europe, these mummies clearly had European origins. Their DNA was studied, revealing markers typically found in populations from the Eurasian steppe and even the Mediterranean region. Now that we know who these people were, the next question is, how did they get there? Theories about their origins range from early migrations to a lost civilization. Let's dive into the three most prominent explanations. First, some experts believe that the people who left these mummies behind were Proto-Indo-Europeans, a nomadic group that roamed across the Eurasian steppe thousands of years ago. These early settlers may have traveled across the vast steppes of Central Asia, eventually finding their way to China's Tarim Basin. The Proto-Indo-Europeans are thought to have originated from the region near the Black Sea or the Caucasus Mountains, spreading their language, culture, and eventually their genetic makeup across a vast expanse. Archaeologists believe they may have reached the Tarim Basin as early as 2000 BCE, well before the rise of the first known civilizations in China. But how do we know they were Proto-Indo-Europeans? Studies of the mummies' DNA revealed European markers, linking them to other ancient European populations. Their genes didn't match those of the local Han Chinese, or even other known Asian groups of the time. This suggests that they could have been part of a migration wave from the West, coming from what we know today as Eastern Europe or the Caucasus region. Another theory suggests that these mummies were part of an extensive pre-Silk Road trade network. Evidence of the early trade routes across Asia, connecting distant lands, might have allowed for the movement of people long before the more famous trade routes were established. These trade networks could have included goods like silk, precious metals, and spices. And if these trade routes were active, they would have been well suited to the exchange of cultural practices and populations as well. But there's one final, more controversial theory, that these mummies are linked to a lost Caucasian civilization. Could they have been part of an advanced culture that existed long before recorded history? A civilization that was eventually erased by time, war, or natural catastrophe. Some fringe theorists argue that these mummies might be the last remnants of a civilization that once thrived in the region, but was eventually wiped out or forgotten. Evidence for this remains inconclusive, but the idea of an ancient Caucasian civilization in Asia adds a new layer of mystery to an already perplexing situation. So, what happened when these European people encountered the ancient Chinese? Were they peaceful settlers, or was there a cultural clash? Some archaeological evidence suggests that the Tarim Basin people may have lived in harmony with the local cultures. The mummies were buried with Chinese artifacts, such as pottery, musical instruments, and tools, which suggests they may have integrated into local society. They wore tartan wool fabrics, which is eerily similar to the clothing worn by ancient Celts in Europe. Additionally, some mummies were found with cheese-making tools, something you'd expect to find in a European context, not China. These discoveries seem to suggest that they had their own distinct cultural practices, but they also may have been influenced by Chinese society. Evidence of a peaceful coexistence is rare, and it's unclear whether these groups lived side by side or were forcibly removed. Over time, the existence of these mummies became a historical footnote, overshadowed by the rise of China's great dynasties. Now we move into a darker part of this story, the part that raises eyebrows even today. Why have so few people heard about the Tarim mummies? Why do most textbooks skip over this discovery? And why does it barely receive any coverage in mainstream archaeology circles? One answer may lie in the realm of politics. The Tarim Basin is located in the Xinjiang region of China, a region that has long been culturally and politically sensitive. The majority of people living there today are Uyghurs, a Turkic ethnic group distinct from the Han Chinese majority. The discovery of ancient mummies with Caucasian features complicates the narrative of a historically unified Chinese identity in that region. From the Chinese government's perspective, acknowledging the presence of an ancient non-Chinese civilization thriving in what is now Chinese territory might open the door to questions of historical ownership, identity, and autonomy. For years, Chinese authorities restricted access to the mummies. Western researchers were denied permits, findings were censored or ignored, and the narrative was tightly controlled. Even when DNA testing confirmed the European origins of these mummies, the results were not publicized widely within China. In many cases, researchers were discouraged from publishing results that challenged official historical narratives. Some historians argue that the Chinese government's reluctance to promote the Tarim mummies is more than just academic caution. It's an intentional move to suppress cultural diversity and bolster a monolithic view of Chinese history. Others suggest it's merely a matter of controlling a sensitive narrative to avoid stoking ethnic tensions in Xinjiang. But the cover-up, or rather the downplaying of these mummies, doesn't stop with the Chinese government. Western academic institutions and history textbooks have also largely ignored them. The prevailing model of East Asian prehistory doesn't account for substantial early European presence. Incorporating the Tarim mummies into that narrative would require a major overhaul of how we understand the peopling of ancient Asia. What does it mean when evidence that could redefine ancient history is buried, figuratively, after it was literally unearthed? Could this be just one of many examples of inconvenient truths being pushed aside to protect dominant narratives? And here's a chilling thought. If this discovery had been made in another context, in another region, say, if these mummies had been found in Europe with Asian features, would the reaction have been the same? Or would the academic and media world have exploded with headlines? These questions open the door to a larger conversation about historical truth, national identity, and who gets to write the history books. So, what are we really looking at here? Are the Tarim mummies the remnants of early Indo-European migrants who happened to settle in a remote desert in Asia? Were they ancient traders moving along long-forgotten trade routes that predated the Silk Road by millennia? Or, perhaps most tantalizing of all, could they be the last trace of a lost civilization, one that stretched farther and deeper into Asia than any historian thought possible? One thing is certain. These people don't fit neatly into any of the boxes we've created for ancient history. They don't look like the people we expected to find in China. They don't act like the cultures we thought dominated the region. And they don't belong to any historical narrative that's been officially sanctioned or widely accepted. But they're real. Their bodies are real. Their artifacts are real, their DNA is real, and their story, though buried in silence for centuries, is beginning to rise to the surface. So, now the question turns to you. Were they explorers, refugees, or an advanced civilization swallowed by time and sand? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into forbidden archaeology, ancient civilizations, and the hidden layers of history, make sure you subscribe and check out my next video. Because trust me, this isn't the only ancient secret the world's been trying to forget.